Hello, I'm Diane Richard, your host of the Veterans Channel. Recently, I spoke with two incredible women. Their names are Virginia DeVellis Wyse and Donna Edward Jordan, both very accomplished in their own right. However, my story with these ladies centers around their involvement with the traveling Vietnam Wall that heals that made its way to McKeesport in August of 2018. Both Virginia and Donna belong to a very notable historic organization, and their affiliation with that organization, in part, chronicles historical military backgrounds. So when the Wall That Heals came to McKeesport area, several of the members signed up as volunteers during the 4-day display. From the hundreds of people, motorcycles, and first responders who escorted the huge tractor trailer transporting the wall to the numerous volunteers who reverently placed the panels in place, to the hundreds of people who poured into Renziehausen Park in McKeesport to view the monument, which stood in solemn reverence to the 58,318 servicemen who paid the ultimate sacrifice during the Vietnam War. Virginia and Donna were present. They were present to witness this historic event, but came away with so much more. Now, listen as these ladies share with us how they were impacted by this symbolic display, and even more so, they're witnessing the reactions of those who visited the wall and the lasting impressions they will forever embrace. Now, don't go anywhere. You will not want to miss their amazing stories. We recently saw the Wall That Heals that came to McKeesport. I guess I wouldn't say recently. I guess I would say last summer. August of last summer, the Wall That Heals came to McKeesport, and it was just something spectacular. For those who could not be there, it was a replica of the Vietnam Wall that is in Washington, D.C. And we had the opportunity to be able to visit with that wall and be able to see a lot of the people and the comrades who have departed us, but who served in Vietnam. So I guess our first question is, how did you all get involved in that? Tell us the story of how this whole thing unfolded and you all were at the wall.
Some things are just meant to be, aren't they?
They are. Absolutely, they are.
Well, I have known Walt Yeager, the late Walt Yeager, the late great Walt Yeager, for many years. And I used to run into Walt at the Norwin Public Library. And sometimes he would come to the genealogy classes that I teach there in the evenings. And I was aware that Walt was working on this project to bring the traveling wall to McKeesport. And Walt was really obsessed with it. And he would talk to me about it from time to time. And I had given him some advice from time to time on how to do things with veteran sites on the internet, how to find people on the internet. Yes, I actually told him how to do that. It's my fault. But he was getting closer and closer to bringing that dream to reality. And I'm a member of Queen Aliquippa chapter, Daughters of the American Revolution. And we have a very active outreach program with veterans. And I thought that Walt's project with the wall might be something that we might want to get involved with. It seemed like a good fit for us. So I talked to the officers and I asked if I could bring Walt to one of our chapter meetings to talk about his project. I thought this is something that our members might be interested in doing as volunteers, because he was going to need personnel on site to help visitors. So they said, great. I took Walt to a meeting and he described what he had in mind, and some of us signed up to help. And I don't know, everything was just poised to go. I think all the dominoes were lined up and we just gave him a little plink and it took off at that point.
So were the other members of your group, were they as anxious to get started with this project and be a part of it as you were?
Well, there were a number,
after they heard about.
There were a number of us that did participate. Yes, not everyone, but a number of us did.
Okay.
And I think it was a very rewarding experience for everyone who did participate.
Okay. How would you describe that rewarding experience?
Well, it was rewarding for me in a personal way. I had the Service to Veterans Committee for our DAR chapter. So our chapter volunteers and gets involved as much as we can with servicing the veterans. So I thought this is a perfect time for me to do this because I had never been to the wall in D.C. And I do have 4 people that I know of that are on that wall, and I thought this is a perfect time for many reasons. For me particularly, it was a much more personal thing in that the one thing I want to say is when I went to the wall, I had experiences with people, and each one of those persons, they all had a particular story. It was so personal to each one of them. Some of them were there for no reason. They didn't even know why they were there, but they were led to go there. And so just to experience that and to share with the veterans that were there and their stories was meaningful for me. And it's something that I always say it was fulfilling and draining all at the same time for me. It was an enormous blessing. I was there because I wanted to be, I was meant to be, and I received many rewards from it. I have many stories, just like everybody that was there does, the ones that were shared with me as well as Donna. And we had a few other gals from our chapter that were there volunteering also. And we each had individual, particular stories, all different. Mm-hmm. And what each one meant to each one of us individually. You know, some had it, well, Donna has it for a different reason. I had it for a much more personal reason.
Well, I'd like to hear some of those stories, but before we get to the stories, I'd like to know, I did read a little bit about Todd and how his influence was in part of this. So do you want to share that with us? Like, who was Todd and what group does he head up, and how you all became involved in that aspect of it before we segue over to the actual wall at the park?
Todd DiPastino. Now, the meeting that we had that Walt was invited to by Donna, I unfortunately was not there that day, and Todd was the guest speaker at our meeting.
Okay,
so
and Todd is?
Todd DiPastino is one of the gentlemen that heads the Veterans Breakfast Club, and is completely involved in all that he can do for the veterans. I've never personally met him, but that's how the link between Todd and Walt and our chapter meeting, that's how it all came together, because he was the guest speaker at that meeting.
Okay, and then from that led on to you all developing a relationship or a partnership, if you will, volunteership, to be a part of the wall when it came. So when you went to the wall, when all the cycles rolled in, tell us that experience. Were part of your people there when the cycles rolled in, or you all were riding on cycles?
One.
Okay,
I did.
okay.
I was one of the riders, and that was another experience. I'd been on many bike runs before, but to be involved in this one was
heartwarming.
It was just something that I've never experienced. Again, I'll never experience that feeling again. But it was wonderful. I've never seen the truck. I did not see the truck when it pulled up. So when we came in I had 2 other gals with me that also ride their own Harleys. So we were there, and many other riders were there, and waited for a while. And finally, they asked for the beginning of the escort to pull out, and then the tractor trailer pulled out with the wall in it. And right behind it, I was blessed to be us 3 ladies. We were the first 3 right behind the trailer.
Wow. Nice.
And the whole thing, of course, was on film, and
yes.
We got to watch that. But to escort that wall, it was it was something that, it'll never happen to me again, that feeling that I had. And to witness the few people that were on the road to salute that trailer, it was wonderful. And then we had our other members there to greet us when we arrived.
I was just standing there taking pictures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very,
and,
very reverent.
Words can't even describe it.
Yeah.
And it was, and so that was the beginning of the whole thing.
Right. So Donna, when you saw them arrive, you were standing there, you were taking all the photos.
I was taking the photos.
And you saw them arrive. What feeling came over you? What did you see?
I had just never seen anything quite like that. It was just so much more than I was expecting. How many bikes were there? It was a couple hundred.
Yeah.
It was
hundreds,
so. It was really loud and proud, I would say. Everybody was just flying the colors. I was taking Virginia's picture. Just one of those little moments of time travel. Virginia is a descendant of one of the original Minutemen who stood on Lexington Green and faced down the British Army with his hunting musket, faced down the most powerful army in the world and stood there. It was one of the most badass things ever, what our Minutemen did up there in 1775. That was one of her ancestors. And there she is today, riding her Harley, flying the flag, escorting the wall into McKeesport. And I thought, wow. So I got her picture.
That's a historic moment.
You bet I did.
That's a historic moment.
You bet I did. So, yeah, it was great to be there. I was glad to see it arrive. I just like to watch people in those scenarios. But I was seeing history happen.
Absolutely.
That was great.
Absolutely.
That was
History
great.
for the McKeesport area.
It was.
Oh, that was awesome. So once they came in, and I'm assuming that you were still there as they unloaded.
I did not watch it. I did not watch it unload.
Okay, Virginia, were you there when they started unloading?
The next morning they did.
Okay.
And my husband and another one of our chapter members' husbands, who were both veterans, were there to help put the wall up. And that, and many other volunteers were there, and
Right.
that took like the whole day.
It was just a giant game of Tetris putting that thing together. It's
Yes.
just the way it was. I heard someone
Absolutely.
describe it. Yeah.
Absolutely. But so, and there again, that was their personal experience. My husband can't bring himself to the wall in D.C. He was in what they say he was where he never was. He was not allowed to say where he was during that time. He was in the Army. So, and to this day, he, like every other veteran that I've ever spoken to in this war, it's hard for a lot of them to even think about it, let alone speak. But he managed to get there and help put the wall up, which was good for him. I'm happy that he got to do that. And so that took a whole day, and then the next day we had to go for training.
Right.
I've spoken with a lot of the veterans that were there, and it was very touching to hear some of their stories. Some of them shed tears upon talking to me, and I wanted to capture the essence of the moment. It wasn't to exploit anyone. It was just to get the raw feeling that these servicemen had for their comrades who was on that wall. And a lot of them wanted to talk. They wanted to say what they were feeling. And I found that to be very heartwarming. I found it to be very expressive. And I found it to be, a lot of them just wanted to talk. They needed, it was an outlet, they just needed to spill. Because it'd been pent up so long inside of them, they needed to say something. And with the wall there, I think it was the time. And those who chose to speak, spoke. And I was just floored with some of the stories that I've heard. So let's share some of the stories that you all heard.
Go ahead, girl.
It's more like the stories What's really difficult is the stories that men were not able to tell because they were too emotional.
Mm-hmm.
Men who couldn't talk about it.
Some just wanted to be there.
One of the images that I have is of a man who came, set up a lawn chair, and just sat in front of the wall for hours. And at one point, he had a cooler with him, and he pulled out a can of beer, and he toasted his platoon. And he sat there and drank it. He didn't want to talk to anybody. He didn't want help finding a name on a wall. He knew who they were. He was the one who came back. A lot of them apparently didn't. But he just came there and had a six-pack with them that afternoon. I watched that happening.
And he was just having a drink with his buddies.
No, he wasn't telling a story, but watching him, I was getting quite a story. Mm-hmm. Part of what we were doing as volunteers is giving people their space, and then at some point asking if they needed help finding a name or taking a rubbing, because we would assist with that process. And one gentleman just fell apart when I asked him about names. He was so upset he couldn't articulate the names. He thought of a first name maybe, but he wasn't even sure that that was correct. He was so distraught by the presence of all of those names on that black granite, all 58,318 dead people's names, that it just triggered him in some way. And he couldn't even remember first names of the men that he had served with. And he completely broke down, and it was really very intense. I finally got a supervisory person for him. But that type of experience, I'm told, is not that unusual at the wall, that it does trigger people. And I think it's so important that we who send men to war understand that this is what can happen.
Yes.
And we need to bear witness when it does, because we have a responsibility when we send people to war, men and women, to deal with the wounds that they return home with, the visible wounds and the invisible wounds. Because here was this man 50 years later, and this was his mindset. He's been carrying this around for 50 years. And that manifested at the wall. And he wasn't telling me a story in so many words either, but I was getting a story loud and clear.
Virginia?
We were asked to write, our chapter had asked for us to write a little story about our experience, and sometimes it's easier for me to write it and rather than just to think about it, because what I realized was that here I was there for 5 days off and on, day and night, and experiencing what I did, the emotion. I mean, I cried with the best of men there those days, and when I left, by the time it was over, I left a different person inside my soul, and I can't even, and that was just a speck, I can't even begin to imagine what these men go through on a daily basis. They leave war, they come home, and a part of them is missing forever. And as much as we can do to help them or try to help them, it's a daily struggle. And I spoke with one man that had said that he had tried for many years to go to the wall in D.C. and just could not bring it upon himself to get there. And I've spoken, we have a lot of friends that are Vietnam veterans, and they say the same thing. They want to go there. Some of them get there, get to the entrance, and they just can't get inside there. But he finally, after 3 attempts, went to the one in D.C. And he said that as he started that wall, he said that the voices of every one of those veterans on that wall were saying to him, "Thank you, brother." Every single one of those. And then there I was standing with him in front of the wall in McKeesport with the same names, and he was sharing that story with me. It was an honor just to stand there and have them open up. And it was so interesting that some would immediately open up to you. You'd be scratching the name on a paper for them, and you didn't know whether or not you should ask about the veteran, or once in a while, you just have to go with the feeling.
Right.
And some would open up immediately, others couldn't speak at all. But this one gentleman shared that story with me. Another one shared a story where he was there with his brothers, and apparently they did obviously wash their own clothes, and they used to hang their clothes on the machinery to dry. And standing right beside him, this piece of machinery blew up, and friendly fire. So he lost a brother there, standing right there beside him.
Wow.
And this was another gentleman that just broke down crying. It was an honor to be there and to be involved in that. But again, I don't. It's hard for me a year later almost to even rehash it. And that was nothing compared to what these veterans, these men and women, went through there.
The feelings that came over them and from them in speaking with them. I had one of the veterans that I spoke with, he talked about being at the wall, and he could feel the souls of his fellow comrades just enveloping him, like holding, and I mean, it was difficult. It was difficult to hear, and it was more difficult to see, as you mentioned, the baggage that some of them came home with, that you can see and that you can't see. And then after 50 years, some were able to have some sort of release, to be able to talk about it, or just to be able to say a few words about what has been pent up inside of them for 50 years. It's incredible. I mean, it's just incredible. And then we see a lot of our veterans who have come home, and from that war, as we know, was a senseless war, they come home and to nothing. They come home to, why were you there, and you did this, that, and the other, and instead of coming home to a hero's welcome. And some didn't even want a hero's welcome. They just wanted to be home and be treated like they were when they left. And I spoke with several of the Romeos who are Vietnam veterans, and they shared some great stories with me. They shared stories with me about being over there, and they shared stories about coming home. And some of them weren't so pleasant. And the feeling, and they still harbor that feeling, that unpleasantness. And, gosh darn, there's something that we have to do to help them through this whole process. There's just something that we have to do, because these men gave their lives. Some perished, some came home, but they still gave a huge part of their lives to our freedom. And we have to do something to give back to them, we'll never give back what they've lost, but hopefully there's something we can do to help them regain some of what they lost, at least maybe mentally, of what they lost. And it's just a sad state of affairs where we are now with our veterans. And that's why Carl and I, we go around and we talk to people who have shared a lot with the veterans and who have done things such as yourselves, to hear the stories and to be able to let others hear the stories, to get on the bandwagon and get with legislation so that we can hopefully try to fix the problems with the veterans.
I know from experience, I've seen an improvement in the veterans' hospitals in the last few years. My husband goes there, one in Oakland, and just when you walk in there, I know I get hit. It's like a wall hits me when I walk in there because of the men that you see there and the women that you see there. And but the improvement in the health care and everything about it is improving, so that's really important. And another lady, she was a veteran, Vietnam veteran, and she works as a nurse at the Oakland Hospital in Pittsburgh. And she broke down as well. She was heartbroken because she is the one that when they come there for help to initially check them in or go through all their records, she said so many of these veterans, it took forever for them to even get to that point. And there's so much there for them, and so many of them don't even want it. You know, they just don't want it.
And I can understand you're saying that, because some of the veterans that I've spoken with, they don't think that they deserve to have it. They feel that I didn't get hurt that badly. Let my comrade, my brother, who lost his legs or lost his arms or is blinded or whatever, let them have my part of the veteran service, medical service. Exactly. But I went to a round table just recently. I went to a round table with Senator Renziehausen Williams, and she is, I believe, part of the chair of the Veterans Reform or something to that order for the state of Pennsylvania, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. She's under Governor Wolf. And there was a round table, and at this round table, I was privileged to be there along with a lot of other veterans that were there, and some who had gone through a lot, some who hadn't, some were, there was I believe a psychiatrist there to talk about the programs that are available to veterans. And what was so interesting about that is so many of them, it first started out with them feeling kind of venting, if you will, about what they don't have. And then we got on a different playing field and we started talking about what was available to them. And one of the veterans talked about how, in what you're saying, how the Veterans hospitals seem to have come a 360. They are so improved and so welcoming, and they have so many programs that are available to the veterans now that they are asking veterans to please take advantage of the programs that they have. But again, like you said, so many of them won't, because they feel that I'm not deserving, let my brother, you know, or let my sister be more deserving. You know, and it's just sort of heartbreaking, and that's what Senator Williams is trying to bring to the forefront, where she can, you know, let veterans know and let the legislation know that we need to let our veterans know that there are things out there for them, there is help out there for them, and that they are privy to be a part of that. They are allowed. You know, it's something for all of them, not just a few. You know, so I totally understand what you're saying. Yeah. Donna, what are you thinking?
I'm just listening to you talk about programs. I'm not a program person. I'm an experienced person.
Well, that was one of the biggies, the programming, the programs that are out there. And also recently, you know, programs as far as helping them mentally, but there are also programs out there that I've learned because I've interviewed Jack Wagner. Okay, I've interviewed Jack, and he hires vets. He has a program where he hires vets, and he has a whole network of businesses that will hire veterans. And I was, you know, there interviewing him, and I saw there was a veteran in there. This particular veteran was looking for work, and through Jack's network, he was able to, while we were sitting there, someone called for him. He filled out all the paperwork and all of that, and he had been there, excuse me, several times, but this particular day, it just all unfolded. And while we were there taping, he was sitting in the background listening to everything, and someone one of the counselors came out and told him, asked him if he could come in one of the offices, and there was someone on the phone to offer him a position.
No mistakes.
No mistakes. No mistakes. So, I mean, I just thought that was awesome. Like, it just unfolded right in front, so it does work. So Jack took me around and he showed me his office, and he explained in the video that, and during the interview, that, you know, he had a network of a lot of businesses that were out there that would help veterans, even not just in Pittsburgh, across the United States. If that's what if he needed to call someone in another state because maybe a veteran was moving to Florida or Montana or whatever, he would make a phone call.
Oh, that's great.
You know, it's good to be connected.
Yeah.
You know, he would make a phone call and he would see what he could do to get that veteran a position, or at least get an interview. And what was so good about his program, if you didn't get what you wanted or you didn't like where you were, your programming doesn't end there. You come back to the drawing board and we try again.
Yeah, that's
you know, and I just thought that was just so awesome, because what are they lacking? They're lacking hope in that instance. They're lacking hope because not a lot of people, there are a lot of businesses, and I don't want this to be misinterpreted, there are a lot of businesses out there that do hire veterans. There may not be a lot of businesses out there that may hire veterans that have possible issues.
Right, right.
And then that's what Jack does.
Yeah. And we're familiar with Jack because our chapter is involved in 2 organizations, and one of them is Life Changing Service Dogs for Veterans.
Yes.
Which Tony Accomando initially
Yes.
was part of, and now he's handed over to Jack, and they've bought that property in Robertson Township. It's a wonderful thing, and we've been heavily involved in that. Our chapter donated and had T-shirts made with the Life Changing Service Dogs for Veterans logo on the back with the flag, and then on the front a little bit, and we've sold the T-shirts, and all that money goes into that fund for this new building that they're I guess they're going to be breaking ground pretty soon.
Shortly, and we're going to be covering it from groundbreaking all the way till the ribbon cutting.
That's beautiful.
Great.
You know, because I think that this is a wonderful, wonderful thing, and Jack did talk about that, and he did talk about the dependency that a lot of the veterans have with the dogs. You know, and forgive me, Eric, if you're watching, but he is in charge of the program out there for the dogs to be put with people who may have veterans who may have emotional problems. And I had the opportunity to interview him and a veteran who was suffering from emotional problems, and he had a service dog there. Service dog's name was Dee Dee. And Dee Dee took the show, but
they always do.
But this particular veteran, Eric said he doesn't talk, he may be a little withdrawn or whatever, and not the case. He was very vocal, he spoke, he was very, he was just telling his story. And Eric was sitting there like, he was like totally amazed, like, is this coming from him? You know, this man never talks, you know? And he just opened up and he was talking about Dee Dee, and we were talking about the program for the dogs and how Dee Dee helps him, and I mean, it's just wonderful. So there are programs there for our veterans. We just have to just get the word out there that these programs are available to them.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
If I could, I'd like to share my personal
Absolutely.
link to this wall.
Absolutely.
And, it was because I'd never been to D.C. I wanted to prepare myself, I guess, just to think, well, what's going to happen when I get there? What am I going to do? I mean, we had training, but so and I have one person in particular was actually the best man at my first marriage, and he was my husband-to-be's best friend, and his name was Wayne Allen, And and I wanted to find out where his name was going to be because he ended up MIA. And so I went on the website for the veterans, and they have, you can look up a veteran's name, and they have the names of all the veterans. And you can put a little notation in there how you knew them or whatever you want to say about them. So I thought, okay, this is pretty cool. I found out the location of where Wayne's name's going to be, so that by the time I went to the one in McKeesport, I'd be able to go there and get a marking. So I made a little notation in that website about Wayne and how he was the best man at our wedding in 1968. And by then my first husband, he'd just joined the Air Force. And Wayne, right after that, went into the Army and was sent over to Vietnam. And so I made my notation about the story, and Wayne was a great guitarist. They were in a band, my husband and him, that was called David and the Sensations, and we always used to joke about to Wayne because he was just the best guitarist of all. He was just cool. So I was prepared for that, and we went and we did our thing at the wall in our 5 days, and I came home after that, and about 3 weeks later, I got an email from a lady from Massachusetts, because that's where we were from, and she told me that she had been cleaning out her jewelry box and had found this MIA bracelet, and it was Sergeant Wayne C. Allen's, January the 10th, 1970, the date that he was missing. And she looked him up online on this website and saw Wayne and the story about what happened to him and saw my little notation. So I left my email address on there, so she emailed me and said that she had this bracelet. Her sister had bought it for her. She was only 10 years old at the time. And she'd had this MIA bracelet that whole time. And she asked if I would accept that bracelet. And I thought, just when I thought I had every blessing possible with this wall and these men and women and these people and the experience, here it is, I have another blessing. She sent it to me. I have the bracelet. I've had it for a year. I wear it to all of our veterans events, our chapter meetings, and shared the story with our ladies. Donna helped me get through that. That was pretty tough, but she, helped me through it, and I explained what was happening with the bracelet. And most recently, I got this conviction that Wayne was finally, his remains were found in 1991, and his remains were sent home. And I thought, I've had this bracelet. His next of kin needs this bracelet. And he was never married, although he was engaged to Sharon, who was his girlfriend and also my maid of honor in our wedding. So I went online and I found Wayne's next of kin, which was his brother, David, who had also been in Vietnam and was in the Marines. And so we connected. This was only like 3 weeks ago. We connected by email. And he shared a story with me that once David got married and he had a boy, of course, he named him Wayne after his brother. And his son, Wayne's nephew, has this shadow box that he already has 3 MIA bracelets of Wayne's that people have found and sent to him. So he has this shadow box with the bracelets and all sorts of memorabilia in regards to Wayne and his squadron that he was in and the crew, everything that happened that day. And I said, well, I just love to send you mine too. So he now has, I sent it to him last week, so now there's another bracelet in that shadow box. This one was, quite personal to me.
Yes.
And because of that also, I finally, after 50 years, even more, I got to connect with Sharon, my maid of honor, who I hadn't seen since then.
The wall just keeps giving.
It does.
Yes.
It absolutely
Yes.
does. And it's,
Wall keeps giving and blessings keep coming.
yeah, absolutely.
It's a cultural phenomenon.
Yeah.
And in all the
really
hardships,
is.
Growing up in that era, Donna was in a whole different mindset, I think. She could speak for herself.
Yeah.
As other people. Some were military, some were against it, some were for it, some didn't want to talk about it.
Right.
It was a really tough time during those years.
Yeah, we kind of romanticize. People like to romanticize the '60s and the early '70s, but it was a hard time. There was just so much turmoil going on.
Oh yeah.
There really was. When you back off and look at it at a distance. I had an interesting experience with a woman at the wall. I let her be for a while, and then I came and asked her if I could help her find any name in particular. And she said, no, nobody in particular. At that point, she was running her hand over the wall. Mm. And she was just saying, just all those names. All these names and all those lives. And then she just broke down and started crying. And she was just overwhelmed with seeing those names. Each one was a dead person. And she started talking about what it was like in her high school during the late 60s. 1968 was the year that we had the most of our people killed there. And that was when she was in high school, and she was talking about the impact of that on her generation of high school kids. And the fear and the not knowing, and boys going away and not coming back, the boys she had dated, the boys she had grown up with, and just the way that just took over her whole adolescence, her whole coming of age experience. And we spent a lot of time, that woman and I can't tell you what all we talked about, but if you were there, you know. We spent a lot of time just talking about what it was like coming up in those times. Neither one of us had a family member killed there, but we just agreed that if you were there during those times, you're a veteran of Vietnam. She and I are veterans of the Vietnam War. There's a whole generation of us that are veterans, whether we fought or not, whether we lost anyone close or not. We are all veterans in some very personal way. And I think that's why, a lot of us just have trouble even thinking about it, even now. It brings back a lot of stuff. I'm a big fan of Ken Burns and his documentaries. I love them. And I have a good friend over in England, and I turned him on to Ken Burns. And I've watched most of what Ken Burns has done except his piece on Vietnam. And when that first came out, my friend in England sent me an email and said, I just watched it, it's fantastic, have you seen it yet? I said, nope, don't think I can. And I still haven't, I just can't. And that says something, that I can't go back there, because I saw Ken Burns' Civil War documentary, and it was so personal, it took you so close. And the only way that was bearable was that it was so many years ago. I'm not able to let Ken Burns take me back to 68,
because that's too close to
69.
home.
I know what that's going to uncover.
Yeah.
How much worse is it for the men who were there?
Yeah.
If it feels like that to me.
Exactly.
Yes.
I graduated from high school in 68, and the summer after I graduated, the first boy from my hometown to be killed in action came home. And I went to his funeral. That was the summer before I went away to college. And I remember standing in line outside the funeral home, because the line went on outside, down the porch and onto the sidewalk. And all of us were waiting in line to file past the closed casket with that boy's picture on top. I was 18 and he was 20. And I've been to many funerals before. I was used to that, but I'd never been to one like that. And it changed my world. It changed my world. We grew up in the aftermath of World War II. And the society was profoundly affected by that war. We lost over 400,000 people in World War II, military deaths, never mind all the civilians that were killed. But every family had a loss, and that was just part of the culture. And growing up in the 50s, You heard all the daddies telling their war stories. When we were kids, we used to play war games. We used to play Army. I was an Army nurse, actually. I had a little medical kit and everything. We had banners. We had a militia on our street. We played combat in the woods, and I think that was pretty typical. And then when I went to school, I had a lot of male teachers at the high school level who were World War II vets, who had come home and gone back and got teaching degrees under the GI Bill. And so they were teaching American history. But they threw a lot of personal stories into it, you know. So at the time, I thought it was interesting that you got these first-person accounts of what it was like to be a tail gunner, you know, over France. You know, that was interesting. But we had a view of American history that was skewed toward very positive, heroic stuff from World War II. It was one big John Wayne movie, you know. And I was thinking about that as I was filing past that closed casket with that 20-year-old's photograph on top of it. And I remember thinking, they lied. They lied. This is what war is. This is what war really is. No matter how you dress it up, it's some kid coming home in a box, and they never told us that. Now, obviously, a lot of young men came home dead from World War II. A couple of men in my neighborhood at home were killed. One of them was killed in the Normandy invasion. I know that now. But somehow all of that didn't get communicated to us kids when we were growing up. And somehow this was just a glorious thing. And then Nam happened to us. And 68, when the body count started piling up, and the television stories were covering it and bringing it into our living rooms every night, and we saw it, and we saw our high school friends coming back. It just
the reality of it
changed my life forever, and I began to see history through a completely different lens. And so when that woman said, all those names, all those lives, I got it. And yeah, we're all veterans of this war. And we all have to come to terms with it in some way. And I was very pleased at the wall to see a lot of teenagers there. Because these are kids who are potentially grandchildren, I guess, of some non-veterans. They were all very respectful. There was no acting up at all. They were looking at the wall. They were very respectful. And I thought, this is good that you're here seeing what it is that war costs when we make a decision to do a war. This is what it is. It's not like a John Wayne movie. It's not like a combat-based video game that you may be playing at home. This is what it is. It's names of dead people on a wall. And you need to know that. We need to teach our children well, just so we know the cost of this thing that we're buying. So I thought that was good too. The wall was very educational in a lot of ways.
That's a perfect example as to what I was saying is is where you were in 1967, 68, 69, 70, what your life was at that time and where you were. Now, somehow I had to grow up very quickly at a young age. So when I did get married, my husband had just joined the Air Force and immediately was stationed in Westover Air Force Base, which was a SAC, Strategic Air Command base in Massachusetts, Western Massachusetts. And so I went from what you're talking about to now being part of the military life. We lived right outside the base. I worked at a dry cleaner. It was right outside the gate. And so I got to know the men and women there, hear the stories of how some were just coming back, how some were leaving, how some never returned. But I'm so happy that I got to experience that at a young age. I was only 19 and 20 when when I witnessed this. But something inside permeates you when you are around that type of lifestyle, and you witness and you know what that military life is about, and it became a part of me. And through research, then I now realize, okay, now I know why when I see the flag I cry. It isn't just because of what I witnessed as growing up through all of this. It isn't because of the stories that my dad told me about when he was in World War II. He was a messenger and saw the concentration camps. And the stories I remember as a little kid, he was with the Flying Tigers, and he was part of Patton's army. And he had stories that he would constantly talk about. It wasn't that, but it was back even further, where it all starts, where your insides come from, where your bloodline is, and it's different for different people, you know. But it has grounded me. It was the grounding that I needed in my life, you know. It has grounded me in so many ways. And this wall in McKeesport, I'm not from here, and I had no idea there were 24 men from McKeesport.
Yes.
Which is I don't think it's anywhere else that there's that many men and women that have died in one town.
And basically, at one time, you know,
During that-
given a span of maybe 1 or 2 years,
Right.
but in that many in that small amount of time.
So it was a learning experience for me to find out about the McKeesport area and you know what that was all about, and to see people come there and say, you know, I have no idea why I'm here, but I'm led to be here today.
There was a lot of that, wasn't there?
Yeah, there really was.
Yeah. The place was just like a magnet.
It
was.
At night, you know, when the park was dark, and they turned out all the other lights so that you could just see that track lighting along the wall.
Yeah.
That glow.
Which was really nice. I almost thought of it as like people coming like moths, you know, coming to a
To the
flame.
True.
Yeah.
And it really did have that effect. People just wandered in because it was glowing in the dark there. It's very magical.
And you remember in the first thing in the morning, at dawn and at dusk, bagpipe.
the guy would come and play the bagpipes, yeah.
It was just
It was surreal.
Yeah.
It truly was. And I think it was more special, actually, than the wall in D.C. You know, that's a
It
little
was
over.
more personal.
It's more personal. It's more
It's more
approachable.
personal. Yes.
I do think the moving portable walls are a very good idea, because they're so much more personal and approachable than the D.C. monument.
and so many that either physically can't make it to DC,
Right.
or because of the distance, they may use that as, well, I want to be there, but I just can't. So when it comes to a local area, it really opens up the minds of the people. Loved ones, you know, mourners, that never ends. It gives everybody a chance to witness. And it's not even, as much as the wall and that meaning is, it's about, like you said, you didn't hear a story from that man, but you've watched a story
I
right
watched
there.
the story, that's right. I think a lot of the people who are there are just going there to mourn the war.
Yes, the loss.
There to just
Yes.
mourn that part of their
Yes.
lives, more so than a person just mourning the loss of innocence,
Correct.
mourning the loss, just that whole era that was so messed up for so many people. Just that phenomenon. You can go to a soldier's grave and mourn that person, but the wall is a place that you can go to mourn a whole era.
When you have 58,000 names
Exactly.
It's
in
just a
front
whole
of you,
era.
it's just overwhelming.
Yeah.
I mean, this was 1959 we lost our first men there. We the people didn't know that our soldiers were over there being killed in 1959, but they were. So 59 through 75, we were losing American citizens in that place. It's just a place where you can go and kind of get your head around that. I think the moving walls, portable walls,
Portable.
traveling walls.
Traveling walls.
I think that's a wonderful idea.
Yeah.
It is.
And Tim Tetz, who is, I want to say, in charge of it, or the curator of the wall, because he travels with the wall.
Oh,
right.
He is a walking encyclopedia.
Oh, he
Yes.
truly is.
Oh my goodness! I interviewed him too. I mean, he is just a phenomenal man. And for him to be so young, and I asked him, I said, what made you want to do this? And he's a veteran, and he said just the love of the military and the loss of so many. He says, I needed to be a part of this. And that's how he is doing what he's doing. And he's doing a phenomenal job. Yeah. He's doing a phenomenal job and taking it to so many places in the United States for people to be able to mourn, if you will, that time.
And he takes the time when he sees groups of children to teach them, and bring them there and teach them, you know, what everything means on the wall. I mean, this was a beautiful thing to see that.
He's very, very good at what he does.
Yes. You know, I want to shift a little bit, and I'd like to talk about. We talked about the soldiers who have come home, the veterans who have come home, those who have not come home. But I'd like to talk about the impact on the families. I spoke with a lady, well, many people, but a lady in particular at the wall, and she was sitting in a lawn chair, and I said, how do you feel about this? And what does all of this mean to you? She couldn't talk at first because she just broke down crying. She couldn't talk at first.
See, there you go. She's a veteran.
Yes. And then she got herself together. She kept saying, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. And I kept saying, you don't have to say you're sorry. It's okay. It's okay that you feel how you feel. And she just said, I don't know why I'm here. I'm here because I need to be here. And she hadn't gone up to the wall yet at that time. She just sat back in her lawn chair. And eventually, I'm assuming, she did make her way up there, but it had to be something in her time.
I saw that too. She wasn't the only one. There were a number of people that just couldn't get close to it for quite a while.
Yes.
That was very common to see that happening. That's interesting. That speaks volumes.
Yes, it does.
What does that say?
It does. It does.
Families were profoundly affected by this thing. They were.
Yeah.
The soldiers' families were very affected.
And loved ones, I spoke to a lady there that her boyfriend in high school was one of the McKeesport 24, and she just broke down as well. They were boyfriend and girlfriend, and he got sent over, and that was the end of that. And also my maid of honor, Sharon, who was after all these years, she still loves Wayne. She was married once, maybe 7 years later, in 1976, and it didn't last not even a year. She's still, and it's a sad thing because I'm anxious. I haven't seen her. I'm going to go visit her in June. I'm going back home to Massachusetts, and I'm going to try to help her with that. But she's stuck, and so many of them, the ones that were left behind, are stuck. I just don't know. I don't know how some people handle it. I just don't know how they get through it.
Well, still and it appears as a lot of them are not handling it.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? And they need help in that way. So it's not just our veterans who need the help as well, but we have our families who also need some type of possible therapy or just some type of help to get through the pain of it all. And some never get through the pain of it all because many internalize, and it's just a part of their lives and who they are.
Yeah, it breaks up parents.
Yes.
It breaks up their marriages. You know, it just it's a tough thing, and that's what I mean about how everybody gets some little speck of personal emotions out of this war, and how they're affected in whatever way, you know, and those 5 days there, we just witnessed a lot. And there again, you know, and that's just us as we're alive, you know, we've lived through it, but there's so many that didn't, and the families are left, and yet we still have those emotions. Whereas it's difficult for me to talk about right now, and I can't even. It really helped me because I try so hard to understand the veterans that I talk to that have been there.
Yeah.
And I just try to understand what it is, and a lot of them can't vocalize it, don't want to vocalize it,
Right.
don't know what it is they want to vocalize. But just to be able to have that smidgen of that stuck now in my soul, which I thank the Lord for that every day. It's a blessing to me. It was a gift for me to be there.
My best friend, Paula, her dad's a Vietnam veteran, and I invited he and his friend, who is also a Vietnam veteran, to when I spoke with the Romeos, when I did the interviews with the Romeos. To this day, he does not talk about Vietnam. He says he was there, and that's it. He doesn't talk about it.
Well, that's how some people cope, and I think
Yes.
that's the way men returning from war have always coped to some extent. I'm sure we all know World War II vets who coped in the same way.
Absolutely.
And that works for some people, and that's okay. But clearly, this war has done some special stuff to people that perhaps other wars did not.
Absolutely.
And I think one of the turning points of this particular war in Vietnam was that the way that our veterans were treated when they came
absolutely.
home.
I think that's the thing that has made the difference. On the other hand, I think, this is going to get political. I think on the other hand, the way that the war was presented to the public had a lot to do with how badly the veterans were treated when they came back to. The fact that everything was not out in the open the way things were in prior wars. And the American public really was kept in the dark about a lot of things. And so there was a backlash, and unfortunately that was taken out on the veterans themselves. Not on those who were truly responsible for the deceit. So,
You're absolutely right. You're right. I don't think that's political. I think that's reality.
Yeah.
Well, it is
I think that's
political
reality.
in some quarters, and for those of you who are responsible, I'm talking to you. Taking names. Yeah.
Absolutely. I spoke recently with a gentleman from World War II. His name is Harry, and he's in a nursing home. He's 92. And he's a World War II vet. Sharp mind, sharp as a tack. He could recollect so many things, so many details, and we had a wonderful, wonderful conversation.
Bless you for getting that all taken down. Because every time an old person dies, it's like the library burned down.
Oh, yeah.
So it's so wonderful to record these memories and get them.
I wanted Harry to be able to see it. And Harry saw it. His family member, she sat there while we did the taping, and they were saying that Harry really never talks. He talks, but he doesn't. Harry talked. Harry talked. And Harry talked. And it was just so wonderful to hear him. And he'd get this smile on his face when he would talk about certain things. And then he would talk about things that weren't so pleasant that happened, that he witnessed, and all the relics and things that he brought back. And all of his relics that he brought back, dozens and dozens of them, are at Soldiers and Sailors Memorial Hall on display.
Oh, nice.
That's nice.
So he talked a lot about that, but just the history behind everything that he was talking about was amazing. And I was just so honored to be able to talk with a World War II veteran, to share all of this information. But he did say that, he gave his feelings on the Vietnam War, and he just felt very badly for those who perished in that, as well as as those who perished in his war that he fought. He was at the Battle of the Bulge, and he was at all of these different campaigns that you know that he was part of during his wartime, and he was just he was saddened by the Vietnam War, and he expressed that, and I just thought that this was like, wow, you know, just to hear this was just amazing, just a history lesson that it's not in the books.
That's right.
Yeah, right.
And the Vietnam Wall coming to McKeesport, and all of those people there, and all of those families there, and all of those veterans that shared their stories or did not share their stories. Not in the history book.
No.
Yeah, I know, Moggy. I know, Moggy. You know about that too, don't you? I know, Moggy. But, so what else do we want our viewers to know?
I think I would. I think they know everything that we know. We've just said it in different ways, from different hearts, you know, different experiences. It's just a good thing, and I can't thank you enough for doing this, because it's so needed, and hopefully it helps someone out there one time, maybe watching, to you know, if they need the help, reach out. There's organizations out there that'd be more than willing to help them, and people, and we understand it, and we get it, and you know, hopefully more people will understand and get it after these conversations that you have. Thank you for that.
Yeah. Thank you for helping pull all that together.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank
This
you.
has been
Pleasure.
wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very
for
much.
sharing.
Thank you so much.
The wall that heals has impacted the very core of those who visited. As night fell, many visitors just sat and remembered their brothers, fathers, sons, relatives, and friends. Some touched the wall in wonderment. Some etched a lasting memory of the names, and still others found themselves only able to view from afar. I was there, and what a spectacle to behold. As dusk approached, and the lights from the ground shone upward on the panels in a bronze color, the souls of the servicemen lost seemed to come forth in the shadows of the lights as a tone of peace and tranquility pierced the summer air. I will never forget the one Vietnam veteran who came at night and sat in a lawn chair with a cooler. A volunteer asked if they could assist with anything. The veteran said, "Nope, just having a beer with my buddies." And yet another just stood, touched the wall, and said, "We're home, brothers. We're home."